when we don't pay attention to ourselves, we are not fulfilled. And when you think about when you overeat, you're trying to be full, right? Yeah. So very unconsciously, you're trying to fill yourself up. And I think so many times when we're compelled to do that, it's because we don't tend to or fill ourselves up in any other way.
You're listening to the Keep Your Plants On podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay Tobias, an overzealous health coach for the overwhelmed people. Here, I want to sift through the noise of diet culture and give you tangible ways to create your own health rather than following everyone else's. I've come across a lot of inspiring, creative, and mind-blowing people, so might as well record them. All right, so today on the podcast, we have Dr. Julie T. Ane. She is a licensed psychologist, founder, and clinical director of A New Beginning. She was one of the pioneering voices to encourage people that there is hope in sustainable, lasting change from eating disorders and from any sort of disordered eating. She is absolutely encouraging, and I'm so excited to have her on the podcast. Welcome, Dr. Julie.
Oh, thank you so much, Lindsay. I am so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. So before we go any further, tell me a little bit about yourself.
You bet. Well, as you said, I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and I'm an eating disorder expert. I also am a specialist in trauma, and that's really important because oftentimes those two go together. I'm the owner of A New Beginning, which is an outpatient treatment center that specializes in both eating disorders and trauma in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I recently co-founded the Healthy Way Out Circle of Hope, which is a really, really innovative online educational community for emotional eaters and binge eaters. It's just a great way to get weekly education and to come together with people really all over the world who are working together to beat disordered eating. A couple of fun facts that maybe some of your audience can recognize is I was actually featured on E! Network's What's Eating You. That was back in 2010. And it was really such a wonderful experience because it's the first time I got a sense of how to reach a broad audience with really true messages regarding eating disorders. And most importantly, how you can get absolutely 100% better. So I was on that show, and then I also worked with the cast of Extreme Makeover Weight Loss Edition. That was really, really fun and meaningful. And that was one of the things that brought me into really embracing populations of people who struggle with emotional eating and binge eating disorder. So lots of different things. I'm also on the faculty of Mayo Clinic. I am a guest lecturer and a consultant for the School of Medicine, where I deliver their eating disorder lecture, which is just such an honor. So lots of different things, cool things, exciting things, and all things that come from my heart.
Wow, that is quite the rap sheet.
Thank you.
So obviously you have been doing your part to encourage people in tons of different arenas now, and I'm really excited that you get to encourage this arena. So how and why did you get into the emotional eating area of eating disorders in the first place? Where did that come from for you?
You bet. Like so many things in life, it kind of comes knocking on your door. For 27 years, I've really embraced working with anorexia and bulimia. It's just in my heart and my soul. I love, again, helping people to heal really from the inside out. And what I really loved about that is dispelling the myth, that people can actually, it's a myth that people can't get better 100% from an eating disorder. And years ago, that was a big platform of mine. I wanted to change really the way that people looked at anorexia and bulimia and provide sufferers with hope. So, as our society started focusing more on the obesity epidemic, and I kind of put that in quotes, I'm not the biggest fan of the word obesity, it started really driving me crazy that there was really no attention paid to the emotional component of compulsive overeating. It was always about diet and exercise, and nobody paid attention to the psychology or the emotional aspects that really we know drive people to overeat in a compulsive way. So I really wanted to educate the world and reach the masses, including physicians, on the fact that we have to look at the emotional component when we are looking at trying to help people with their chronic struggles with weight. And then the other thing was really the more that our nation and our world diets, the more it really backfires into disordered eating. And so the other part of that platform, which really led me into my work with emotional eating, is that we have got to help people to stop dieting. That is not an effective way to have healthy management of your body or your weight. It's exactly the opposite. It actually is really the primary cause of chronic struggles with weight. Mm-hmm. So, really those two things really struck my heart. We had so many people coming into the clinic that were struggling with binge eating, and they didn't even really know that it was a thing. They didn't know that it was a formal diagnosis. And oftentimes it was triggered by them being put on yet another diet from their physician. And oftentimes it would, almost in a post-traumatic stress disorder response, kind of trigger that binge eating behavior, because most of these people had been put on a diet at a very, very young age. So it was really in response to this, saying there's got to be somebody that goes out and starts educating people on what this is really all about. It's not just about, well, it certainly isn't about counting calories or good food or bad food. It's not just about extreme exercise. It's really about looking at why you're using food for reasons other than physical nutrition. And I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of reasons why people use food other than nutritional support.
Yes, and I want to dive into all of that. I'm so excited that you specifically are passionate about going from the inside out. As someone whose motto is stop dieting and start nourishing your body sustainably, I could not be more on board with what you're talking about right now, because if you think about America right now, we are dieting harder than ever before, and we are more overweight and have more issues with food than ever before. Absolutely. And so obviously I'm not saying that the reason that we're overweight is because we're dieting, but I'm saying it's absolutely not solving the problem. And it's creating this fixation with food. It's creating this emotional need for food. And when you say, I can't have this and I can't have that, and just like you were just talking about, this morality that we attach to food, when we connect that to food, we start to feel guilt and shame after eating a muffin.
Right.
And in reality, and that just has such a negative connotation. So and when you're talking about how young these people are coming in, I remember my first thoughts about food circulated in about 6th grade, when I look and say, maybe I should look more like that. She doesn't eat a lot of food. I read online, and this should mark my age that I was already reading online when I was in 6th grade, seeing, there's all these diets online, like Beyonce's juice cleanse and all of these things. Maybe I should be doing that. And I remember that being the first trigger of maybe I should be looking different. Maybe I should be eating different. This is bad. This is good. So talk to me a little bit about your views on disordered eating, rather.
Yeah, well, first of all, Lindsay, I've got to share with you what's in my heart as I'm hearing your story. My heart is just breaking for you. And it is also, unfortunately, what we hear so many times over and over and over again at a really young age. And it's really ever younger. Kids are being exposed everywhere. Number one, sometimes in the home, certainly on social media. The more we respond, again, in quotes, to the obesity epidemic, the more the schools are going back to, weighing kids, and they're giving, again, quote unquote, nutrition classes that are really telling them that to eat fats are bad, and the worst thing I ever heard, and this was actually from my daughter in 3rd grade, was that the gym teacher was handing out M&Ms and then having them walk the length of the soccer field to show what it takes to burn the calories in that M&M.
Oh my word.
That my daughter was telling me that as I was driving her home from school. Yeah. So many people have been exposed over the decades, and now unfortunately over the generations, to this diet mentality. And we actually do have an abundance of research that shows that dieting behavior actually is highly, highly correlated with weight issues later in life. In fact, hold on to your chair with this. Adolescents who diet are at 324% greater risk of being obese as an adult.
Okay? Wow. Can you say that again for the people in the back?
Adolescents who diet are at 324% greater risk of being obese as an adult.
Wow. Can you unwrap that for me?
Well, I think that it's really what we're talking about. The more people diet, and again, we have this data, hard data, in hundreds of research studies, but dieting actually, in most cases, predates issues with weight. Okay? And the reason why is because anybody who gets put on a diet long term, that very restricting behavior, and I'm sure everybody can relate to this, ends up setting up this binge eating dynamic, right? I can't have, I want, and then when there's a time of vulnerability and you're able to have that food, you're going to overdo it, right? And then if you go back on a diet, and then the same cycle, right? So what this does is it sets people up for binge eating, which is actually then what then creates obesity. And that should be like, yes, of course we get that, but most people don't understand that. People who are placed on a diet or restrictive eating, and that can be because of type 1 diabetes, that can be because of PKU, all right? We know that these individuals are at greater risk of developing binge eating behavior because of that chronic restriction. And binge eating behavior is a precursor to obesity. Okay? So we have to look at it in that linear direction. We can't look at it as, oh, someone's overweight and therefore we have to put them on a diet. We have to say someone's overweight and I wonder why. Let's look at their history and then let's help unravel that and teach them a better way to approach food, right? So that we don't keep doing the same very thing that we know by research creates disordered eating and binge eating behavior, which then leads to chronic issues with weight.
Yeah. Something that I'm very passionate about is one of my biggest beefs, no pun intended, with diet is that it turns into just a checklist, an external checklist of, oh, I have to do this, 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 and that. I cannot have these things. And first of all, most people don't really understand why those lists are there in the first place. A lot of times the people who gave them the list don't even understand why it's there in the first place. Like, why should they not be having added sugar? Why should they not be having these inflammatory foods? So
Absolutely.
they start following this checklist and they do something rather than becoming someone. And I think the sustainability when it comes to our health comes when we actually become someone. We become a healthy person rather than doing a healthy thing. And I think that distinction is really important because a healthy person isn't an unbelievably structured, rigid person.
Yeah.
For the most part, there's different personality types, and I could kind of go into that. But when you actually understand why you're doing what you're doing and it matters to you and it's within you, that's something that I think is a lot more sustainable rather than the pressure that's constantly put on people to be something different than they are. We always go back to who we are.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're talking about this certainly from the psychological, right? Which is so very important. And the other part of this is when we go with that checklist that you were talking about, like I have to eat this and I have to eat this at this time, and it has to be kind of in this portion. What we're doing is we're teaching people to eat based on external cues as opposed to internal cues. Okay. And I know that you embrace the same thing as I do, which is intuitive eating, right? So ultimately, we have the ultimate wisdom for what our body needs, and that's called appetite, right? Good old physical appetite. And the shame with diets is it disconnects us from our own natural signals of hunger and fullness, and also what our body needs. Does it need meat, or does it need vegetables? Does it need some more fat, right? If we would listen to our internal cues and trust it, right, then we would be able to eat what our body needs. And there really wouldn't be these chronic struggles with weight and the need to go on yet another diet that's going to mess lots of things up, including your metabolism, right? You know, all of those problems that can happen physically when we are not eating according to our physical cues of hunger and fullness.
Yes, I'm like smiling from ear to ear right now. I love what you're saying right now. So for someone listening, I personally have adopted the method of intuitive eating about 4 years ago, and it has been one of the most beautiful things to see that relationship with food and that relationship with myself heal. And that's a reason why I have the capacity to care for my clients in this area the way that I do, because I went through it myself, and I've seen in so many people how this disordered eating, and one of the things that you specifically have termed for me is that disordered eating turns into a disorder of self, and or it starts as a disorder of self. So one of the things I wanted to ask you was, how does that communication in our body of what we need and what we actually give our body, how does that get scrambled? Where do we miss the mark there, and how do we get back to that?
Oh, that is a great question. It gets scrambled in a lot of different ways. And it's funny because there is this parallel really between what we do with our body and our hunger and our food, and what we do with other aspects of ourself, like our emotions and our needs. Okay. So you're going into one of my favorite areas. Actually, I have two favorite areas. One is intuitive eating, and the other is really care of the self, right? Listening to yourself, your real self, feeding your soul, which I'm sure we'll go into today. But so the concept is this. There is an emotional part, obviously, to emotional eating, right? We have the first part, which we've talked about, which is this dieting mentality, which for some people is just really chronic. The other part is when we don't have a relationship with ourself and our emotions that's healthy. And what I mean by healthy is that when we're connected to ourselves and we notice that we have a feeling like sadness, if we have a healthy relationship with our emotions, number one, we're connected and we're aware of that. And then when we feel that sadness, we step in and we say, what is it that I need to kind of support myself through this emotion, right? Do I need to cry? Do I need to reach out to a friend? Do I need to spend some time kind of journaling today and explore what's on my heart, right? And if you respond to your emotions in a healthy and fulfilling way, then the emotion then dissipates. It's been satisfied. The need has been heard and it's been taken or paid attention to. Okay. So that's in a good kind of scenario where you are supportive of yourself. But a lot of times people get sideways with their emotions. And so first of all, they might be disconnected from themselves. So we have emotions that go on all the time, but if we've learned to be disconnected from our emotions, they're operating really underneath the surface. And so they might show up in the form of anxiety, or they might show up in like looking like depression, or it might show up where I just took a long nap today and I kind of checked out from the world, because you're not able to really know kind of what gave rise to that emotion in the first place. Okay. Yeah. If and when that happens, and if food has been introduced to you in your life as a means to comfort yourself, right? And or sometimes as a means to kind of avoid things that are uncomfortable, right? Or tension, or boredom, then a lot of times when emotions are operating underneath the surface, but you're not aware of them, and or you can't identify them, or sometimes you don't respond to them in a healthy way, people are going to reach for food and say, why am I in front of the refrigerator again? Yeah. Why did I eat that whole bag of chips? Yeah. And then they're going to start beating themselves up instead of saying, what might have been going on for me emotionally? Okay, that led me to use food in this excessive and or compulsive way.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. I had coffee with a friend about a little bit ago, and one of the things she said to me was that her life mantra was pay attention to your life. And I loved that. And it kind of spiraled for me. Like that turned into so many thought patterns for me, because I realized how little we can pay attention to our life. And one of the things that I work with my clients the most on, which I think kind of blindsides them sometimes, is being aware of that internal dialogue. Yeah. Being aware. And as so many people realize after an emotional eating episode, or realize while they're having their head in the fridge, or they're sitting right outside of their pantry, or they're going again to get another snack. And that's something that a lot of people are experiencing right now with this quarantine of, why are you getting a snack again?
Right. Oh, I was just going to say, I just love this because we speak such the same language. I mean, there's so many rich pieces to what you're saying. When we don't pay attention to ourselves, we are not fulfilled. And when you think about when you overeat, you're trying to be full, right? Yeah. So very unconsciously, you're trying to fill yourself up. And I think so many times when we're compelled to do that, it's because we don't tend to or fill ourselves up in any other way, right? So the more we can do what you're talking about, like be connected to ourselves and know what we need, and then reach in and really support that, what I call feeding your soul, we're going to be less apt to compulsively feed our bodies, right? Because our bodies need just enough food, right? But our soul needs other things as well. And so if we're not feeding our soul, we're going to try to feed that soul with food, because food really is the first basic sense of comfort that we got, right? We were held and we were warm and we were breastfed or bottle fed, and we got a sense of comfort and nurturing. So it gets wired very, very early. So if we don't tend to ourselves, if we don't really fulfill us from the inside out, it makes us super vulnerable to misuse food.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Feeding your soul. I think that is one of the most beautiful phrases because it lets people realize that that's the essence of what we're doing.
Yeah.
That's the essence of what's actually happening when you're using food to satisfy insecurity.
That's
You're
right.
using food because you don't want to look at a relationship. You're
Yes.
using food because you're unfulfilled, and food offers you a momentary moment.
But yes, and it works in the moment, but because it doesn't take care of the real problem, that's why it feels never ending, right? So that's why then the next day you're compelled again.
Yeah.
And people start thinking that they're addicted, quote unquote, to food, because it's not meeting the real need. So the more we meet the real need, like have a need for intimacy with a safe partner that is emotionally supportive.
Yeah.
I have a need for a job that's fulfilling, that really speaks to my creativity, right? I have a need to kind of take myself out in the sunshine and go on a hike, right? When we listen to those needs and we step in and support them, we're fulfilled. And we don't need to keep then trying to fill ourselves up when we're miserable in an unfulfilling relationship, or we're in a dead-end job that we hate and doesn't fit ourself, and or when we're not allowing ourselves to go out and move our bodies in a soulful way because maybe we're insecure, right?
Yeah.
So this concept of tending to the self and feeding your soul is one of the really primary factors that I help people to cultivate within themselves when we're working on emotional eating. And it seems like it's this kind of like abstract out there concept, but we connect the dots just like we're doing now to say, look, until you're really fulfilled, you're going to keep turning to food because you're not tending to yourself in any other way.
Yeah. And I do want to kind of clarify, right now we're specifically talking about food because that's what really Dr. Julie's specialty is. But for some people, it could look a little bit different. I know for me, my mom used to check my hands to see how short my nails were because I would bite like a crazy person whenever I felt like something was not right within me. And I remember I used to Google all the time how to stop biting your nails, and I would even get those really terrible tasting nail polish.
Yes.
Put them on, and I would just bite through it. Like, the need was so great and the compulsion was so great that I would just bite, and sometimes my nails would bleed. And what I learned through that was none of those little hacks, and that's what diets are. They're little hacks to try and fix the outward problem. None of those little hacks ever worked because they never satisfied the stress or the longing or the uncomfortability within me that was causing it in the first place.
The underlying need.
Yes, that underlying need.
And the need to then develop skills in a real way to effectively say, how can I manage my stress or anxiety? How can I look at what's causing me to have that stress or anxiety and make some changes? And when you do, then you're going to have a better chance not biting your nails, or not drinking excessively, or not having compulsive or unsafe sex, right? I mean, there's all sorts of different ways that people engage in compulsive behavior that can be really harmful for them. And it's not because they're bad people, it's not because they don't have willpower. It's because there's something else that's driving that compulsion. And too many times we don't do the deeper work, right? And that deeper work, in fact, that's the name of the video cast that I do in the Healthy Way Out Circle of Hope. That deeper work is so imperative for you to truly heal and change from the inside out so that your behaviors can be different forever, right? Not just short term.
Yeah. So can you give me a little bit of a glimpse of what that deeper work looks like?
Well, that's multifaceted. It really, really is. So we are talking about some pretty relatively straightforward and primary areas because we've got just a limited amount of time for this podcast. And I think the most important is really that intuitive eating, the dieting mentality, and kind of this beginning, most basic understanding of emotions, being connected to yourself, being able to identify what those emotions are, and then hopefully being able to step in and readily support those emotions in a loving and compassionate manner. Okay?
Yeah.
So there are all sorts of things, though, that get in the way of you being able to do what I just kind of simply said in that emotional component, right? And if it was that easy, we would all be able to do it readily. But let's say that you had a family of origin, and let's say your parents, or one parent, was one that said, you're too sensitive. Okay. Like, who cries over that? You need to go in your room, and when you can stop crying, come out. Okay. So right there, and I think probably a lot of people can relate to that, what are you inadvertently learning? You're learning, number one, there's a negative judgment towards normal and spontaneous emotions. It's bad. Something's wrong with you. You're too sensitive, and that's why you're feeling, right? So instead of paying attention to those feelings, you're like, oh my goodness, something's wrong with me. You have to go away, find a way to get disconnected from yourself and your emotions, stuff it, right? Mm-hmm. And then come out with a smile on your face to then be engaged with others in the family.
Yeah.
Okay. So right there, that's one snippet of how one scenario in, let's say, a family of origin can cause kind of that natural positive emotional process to go sideways. Okay. Mm-hmm. Other times there's things like alcoholism in the family. There might be domestic violence. There might be too many children in a family, and so your needs get more neglected, and so you never really learn how to take care of your needs. Okay? Mm-hmm. So there are lots of things within each individual person that causes your emotional process to go sideways. And so in the deeper work, we need to be able to work to uncover what that is, right? And this is not about blaming your parents or blaming your family of origin or blaming your history. There's lots of factors that come together, and pretty much everyone is doing the best that they can at any given point in time, right?
Yeah.
But to understand it is a necessary step in then stepping in and working to fix it within yourself. Yeah. And the way that we do that is we develop a different type of relationship within ourselves, what I call the intrapersonal relationship. We might do some reparenting work of that child part or parts, right, that received those messages, and we want to get your adult healthy so that your adult gives those other parts healthier messages for you then to be an adult that doesn't kind of repeat those same dynamics within yourself.
Yeah. I actually really appreciate that you just said that about parents. I think that is a trend that is, I wouldn't say going around right now, but I feel like it's very easy to just be like, oh, my parents did a terrible job. And by the way, Mom, if you're listening to this, you did an amazing job. I do hear that a lot. And yes, I completely agree that there are some really tragic and traumatic circumstances, but to be able to not cast it as blame, but as understanding of, okay, now the only reason this piece of information is helpful to me right now is because it brings awareness to me. It brings awareness back to the things that are in my control without me still standing here outside of myself pointing.
Right.
And,
Exactly.
and I just think that I really do appreciate you saying that. So,
Can I just add to that a little bit, Lindsay, if that's okay? It is just so true, because there's all sorts of things like somebody can be a super, super, super wonderfully sensitive child, right? So there is actually a term that's called a highly sensitive person, and 20% of the population are highly sensitives. I happen to be one myself, and I have 2 daughters that are also. It means that you're super intuitive, you're super creative, you've got like a huge heart, and you feel really deeply. So if you have a parent that is not a bad parent, but maybe somebody that's not highly sensitive and they just don't get you, right? Yeah. There's a misattunement. And so that misattunement with someone that's really highly sensitive, right, can be pretty damaging. And that doesn't mean that they're abused. It doesn't mean that they're neglected, but it's the combination of a lot of different factors. And, it's not just parents, it's peers, it's what we pick up in our culture. Sometimes it's what we hear from teachers. Sometimes we have a biochemistry that's super perfectionistic or that's prone towards anxiety or being more obsessive. Mm-hmm. These are all things that come together in this perfect, imperfect storm that end up kind of affecting how you respond to your emotions. Mm-hmm. And so we have to just explore it in the deeper work. We have to tease it all apart. And then we have to work on reworking that within your adult self through your own choice and your own kind of proactive behaviors to change, which you absolutely can. Yeah. And then you're going to be able to have a healthy, responsive relationship with your emotions, and you're not going to need to use food to fulfill yourself.
Yeah. I love also that in the deeper work, I love that those 2 words put together. Deeper because you have to actually dive and search and be intentional about it. But I love the word work because I think a lot of times when we have this idea of growth and of healing, it's this beautiful picture that's completely linear going straight up to a mountaintop experience. And sometimes growth stinks. Right. Sometimes growth is unbelievably uncomfortable. If it wasn't, we'd all be completely healed of everything at all times.
That's right.
So I love that you, even in the title, you're like, deeper, yes, work. This is
I tell my clients, if you're too comfortable for too long, it means you're not doing the work that you need to do. And that doesn't mean forever. I mean, at some point it all comes together, but it's important to know that this is, I love your word, intentional. And it's effort. It really is effort, because what we're doing is we are going against something that has become so natural, right? And a lot of times these are coping mechanisms or subconscious defense mechanisms, right? And they've worked. They have worked at certain points in your life. To avoid emotional pain, right, has worked. It kept you out of feeling sad or maybe overwhelmed when you have no other coping mechanisms. Yeah. So they work at one point in your life, but when it gets then brought forward into your current life and you're still avoiding, you're still not learning how to take yourself through grief or sadness, and therefore turning to food or other things to kind of comfort yourself. We have to go back and we have to learn what that's like to go through uncomfortable or painful emotions, to learn that we will live through them and we will get to the other side actually in a better, stronger place. But we can only do that by walking through the emotions. And a lot of times you need either a wonderful coach like yourself or a therapist like myself to kind of hold your hand through that journey, because it can be really overwhelming and complicated to do that on your own.
Yeah. No, I absolutely love that. And so right now, if you're listening to this podcast as it airs, you are aware that there is a lot of craziness, a lot of fear, and a lot of anxiety happening with COVID. And one of the ways that I kind of want to shift right now is like, if you've listened to me at all, you know that I'm really intentional and really set on focusing on what's in your control.
Mm-hmm.
And originally we had this typed up of things that are in your control with your health and everything. But I am going to be asking you, Dr. Julie, what's in your control in general? And then how does that shift due to our circumstances right now for those who might feel a little out of control?
Yeah, you bet. So I'll give a big answer to your big question. What's in your control? And I am going to say your happiness, because I think that there are so many different things that you can do to help create your own happiness if you tend to it yourself. And I don't mean that in a Pollyannish way. I mean it that people who are happy are people that are intentional, and they do the work to create a life that is happy for them, right? Within themselves, with others, with their work, right? With purpose, with meaning. So I always encourage people to know that life doesn't just happen to you. Like, you play a big instrumental role in how you respond to life.
Yeah.
So I would say that first and foremost, and within this unprecedented, unbelievable COVID pandemic, I think that we have to, before we get to what's in your control or how to maintain some sense of well-being and happiness within the situation, we have to do a first step, and that is to allow yourself to be connected to those real kind of feelings on the other side of the spectrum. There is going to be a lot of fear. There is going to be a lot of anxiety. There's going to be overwhelm, and there might be anger, right, for different kinds of things. So we have to allow ourselves to connect to those, and this is in quotes again, negative emotions, and to grieve and to vent, kind of throw a little fit in a tantrum. I can't believe I have to stay at home, and, all this kind of stuff, right? You have to clear that out of your system in a very real and valid way. And then your psyche can come to, okay, so what can I do given this situation? Okay. Yeah. Because our psyche always is going to bring us to this place of positive, but oftentimes we need to go through the very real of the other feelings first. Okay. That's so important. People try to sidestep that, and then they never get to the positive in an authentic way. Okay. Yeah. So let yourself do that first part. and then take this opportunity to say, okay, so in this situation, what is within my control? And that can be different things for different people. I mean, it can be certain things relative to finances. Let's not spend as much, that we normally would, just in case, because we don't know what's going to happen down the path. It might be, other things related to mechanisms that you're doing to kind of protect yourself and your family's health. So kind of saying, what can I do to control those parts of it? But then I would encourage people to say, what can I do with this time that I have, that I'm not commuting back and forth to work, and I'm not going to the kids' soccer practice, or I'm not going to this extra meeting or this, business dinner. Like, what can I do that I don't really have the time for, that really comes back to feeding my soul? And to allowing yourself to embrace those things during this time in a very intentional way.
Yeah. Oh, that is so beautifully said. One thing that I actually just spoke to a client about was how often we hear, oh, if I just had the time, if I had the time, I would do this, I would be that, I would accomplish this, or I would start this. Yeah. And something that I think a lot of people are realizing right now that I think is very important to harp on is that time does not equal productivity. but
Right.
intentional time equals
Right.
productivity. And
Do you,
go on.
I'm so sorry, Lindsay.
No,
Can I share something?
yeah.
As you're saying this, I am reflecting on probably one of the best days that I have had in a long time yesterday. And you know what I did? I watered the plants in my backyard.
Oh,
Now that sounds really funny, but I live in Arizona and we have a drip system, and it's spring and it's beautiful. It's the best time of the year. It's so fragrant out. And I never take the time to get the hose and to water the plants. And I think I spent 2 hours watering plants and just thinking and smelling and just enjoying the sounds of the birds and just being outside. And then I made a really favorite Filipino dinner, and that's part of my heritage, for my kids. And we played music and we chopped ginger and garlic and we danced and we laughed and we came together in a way that we haven't for quite some time. Not quite in that way where we just had seemingly all the time in the world, because none of us could go anywhere.
yeah.
So it's those kinds of things that I think if we are intentional, we say, what do I really want to do with this time? We can fill this space in a way that fills our memory banks with really positives that can counterbalance the anxiety and the negatives.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like an amazing day. I love that so much. I love that because you created it. Because if
Yeah.
you had woken up yesterday, and said, oh, there's nothing for me to do, you might have been right. But your response was, I'm going to build it. I'm going to see that I need to practice some creativity. I need to engage in community with my family. And it's not there right now, so I'm going to build it. And I think that's such an important thing. And honestly, that's what I'm praying comes out of this quarantine for a lot of people is, hey, there's a lot within you that you might not have tapped into. And there's a lot of people that said they wanted to write a book. There's a lot of people that said they wanted to learn another language or learn how to paint. And they didn't see an opportunity. And right now, if all you needed was more time, you've got it. And so I'm really excited to see people live a more creative life, honestly.
Yeah, and I'm hearing that really across the board from my clients. They are discovering, kind of returning to, simplicity. They are, kind of reaching within themselves and saying, okay, what is it that I'm really yearning to do today? Because that's really kind of how we listen to our soul. It's like, what is calling to you? And it might be writing a book. It might be being outside. It might be dancing, with your kids in a silly way. But like, what is calling to you? And if you listen to it, you're going to find that is going to be one of the best days of your life, right? Yeah. Because you have fulfilled your soul and there's been the time to do that. And I'm right there with you. I am hoping that we learn a lot of lessons from this time and that we don't go back to just crazy busy life, that where we don't really appreciate the simple things and the time that we have with each other. I hope we make some changes, lots of changes actually moving forward.
Yes, me too. Me too. So lastly, I kind of just want to ask you about the people that you've gotten the privilege to work with. How have you seen some of your patients start to use their own voice and live and create their own lives?
Oh, you bet. It is one of the greatest privileges to go on this journey with people who come into themselves, right? Start really living their real life from that real self. It's just absolutely beautiful. So let me see. Let me go through kind of some of my files of all of the different ways that people have done that. A lot of times, and I'm thinking about one person in particular, won't give their identity, but people kind of become quote unquote what they think they should, and this one person in particular became a lawyer because they were supposed to do something professional that was both their family message and then their cultural message, and it was the absolutely last thing that their soul wanted, and they were just miserable. So through our work, they actually allowed themselves to start a business, which was a dance studio, because as a child, all they really wanted to do was to be a dancer and a performer. So they decided, and I have goosebumps as I'm saying this, that they wanted to give the gift of purpose and of really nurturing other people's purpose to kids who might similarly have that same dream. And that's how they came back to their real self. And they were extraordinarily successful in this wonderful heart-driven business.
Wow. Oh, I love that.
Yeah. So that's, I think other ways is, sometimes people just start using their voice, and maybe they've had, kind of an unequal relationship in their marriage, or maybe they haven't spoken up to their parents, and they start using their voice. And that might sound scary to some of your listeners, but then they realize that once they start listening or using their voice and really, kind of like expecting that other people are going to listen to what they're saying, they're really surprised that other people respond to them differently. Yeah. So maybe that unequal marriage where they felt like, kind of they didn't really get to do the things that they wanted to do in that marriage. Now they're feeling like they have more of a voice, and they're more in love than ever because they feel like their partner is really listening to them, and they feel more in love. All right. Yeah. So it's those kinds of things. I think sometimes, people step forward really with deeper aspects also of their true self, maybe their sexual identity or their gender identity. They let themselves be who they really are. And for the first time in their lives, feel like they are living, kind of their authentic self, and, other people just adopt a hobby. Like, I'm going to follow my heart's desire to be a photographer, or to start a painting class, and, make time and space for that hobby in their life, and they feel more fulfilled, which feels like they have more energy. They feel warm inside. They're happy. They feel like life has meaning. So there's lots of different ways, big and small, and it's important to know that this is a process. It doesn't mean that you're going to change your life overnight. That would be overwhelming. Yeah. But it is possible step by step. And number one, guess what? You're going to lose your emotional eating along the way, and you're going to gain feelings of happiness, fulfillment, and purpose, and a greater sense of self as a result.
Yeah, I love that. And there really is no need for filling yourself with food when you are full.
That's right.
And when you are living creatively and living out what you feel like is inside of you, I think that it becomes actually our responsibility when we start to realize that, like, we have capabilities and passions that are different from everyone around us. And what would it look like if we pursued them? What would it look like if we actually pursued them? How would this world go around a little bit differently if we lived our own lives? And I just love everything that you're talking about. I think that it's wildly inspiring, and I hope it's really inspiring to our listeners as well. I want them to be able to hear everything that you have to say, because it's all gems. So tell everyone who's listening right now, how can they find you outside of this podcast?
Well, I think that, a couple things. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. So Instagram is Julie, Dr. Julie T. Ane. I don't know if you'll post any of these, Lindsay, but Instagram is Julie Tiane. No, Dr. Julie Tiane. This is terrible. I think my Facebook is Julie Tiane PhD. Okay, so anyways, you can look up Dr. Julie Tiane on Instagram and Facebook, and you should be able to find me. You can go to anewbeginning.com. But probably the most exciting is we have a YouTube channel, and that is going to be Eating Disorder Recovery for a New Beginning. And then lastly, if you want to interact and hear more of this kind of work every week, I give a weekly video cast along with my co-founder, Dr. Ashley Southard, on the deeper work. You can join the Healthy Way Out Circle of Hope, and that is that online platform where we give education and support in a private community. And you can find us at the Healthy Way Out Circle of Hope.mn.co.
Okay. And I will list all of those in the show notes as well. So if anyone has any interest, please go reach out to Dr. Julie because she is doing the Lord's work.
I would love to hear from any and all of you. It would just be really my privilege to kind of hear a little bit about your journey, kind of see what you say about some of the things that I'm mentioning. I don't want you to feel alone. It's too hard to be alone on this journey. So reach out, find support. There's definitely other people out there that are struggling with the same things. And always there's hope for you to have full and lasting recovery. Never settle for anything less.
Wow. There is no better place to end than that. Thank you so much, Dr. Julie. And we hope that you have a safe and blessed week.
Thank you, Lindsay. Take care.
At the end of the day, you get to choose who influences you. So thank you for listening to today's episode, and please reach out if it encouraged you at all. You can find me on Instagram at KeepYourPlantsOn or online at howtokeepyourplantson.com, where I have my online nutrition program, meal plans, and recipes. Have a happy, healthy week.